You guys know me, and you know me as director of the Moorad Center. Well, we have Moorad, part of it, here at Live and in Color. So it's good to have Jeff, who's not around much, but when he is, it's always a treat for students to come and listen and come hear him. And what I thought I'd do right now is sort of treat him like we treat our speakers in the speaker series. Kind of going to let him talk about his background, how he got to where he is today, what he's doing now, and his goals and vision for this center. Hopefully we're achieving or well on our way. So without further ado, Jeff Moorad.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you all for coming, especially impromptu. I sent an email to Andrew last week.
Yeah.
And said, hey, I'm going to be in Philly. Any chance we can get together? And by the time I finished that discussion, he had me roped into 2 meetings, a student gathering, and dinner.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you. You know, I first want to say, sorry I move around a little. Sorry for the camera there, but I first want to thank Andrew. You know, and by the way, how many of you have been in Andrew's classes, or not all, but most? Okay. Are you crashing?
No, just the one.
All right, got it. But you're going to be in his classes, right? Okay. So, you know, I want to thank him for an amazing job that he's done. I still remember when Dean Gotanda and I called him and said, listen, you know, we're really interested in having you consider this, you know, the executive director job that we're creating. And Andrew was very polite with the dean on the phone, and then afterwards called me and said, hey, can we really talk about this now? And I said, yeah, we can. And, you know, we actually spent, you know, because we have similar backgrounds, you know, I spent 20 years in the agent business and then 10 years on the team side. And now I teach out at UCLA's business school, the Anderson School. You know, we related to kind of a lot of the same stimuli and experiences, and I was able to, you know, share with Andrew kind of my view of what this center, you know, hopefully could become. And, you know, when it was nothing, of course, it was all, you know, whiteboard stuff, and so we really, you know, it was a dream of mine, and luckily one that was shared by the dean here at the time, as well as some other faculty that supported it. And I don't think we could have found a better fit than Andrew. I mean, I'm, you know, personally, you know, thrilled that he was able to, you know, kind of recraft his life. And, you know, my argument was, look, you know, you've got TV, you've got, you know, other media responsibilities, Sports Illustrated, ESPN, et cetera. You know, you've done the agent thing, you've done the team side. You know, and by the way, he was working at the Wharton School at the time, so it's not like he missed the academic side. But what I argued is that this had the potential to be a platform that would be, you know, kind of complementary and incremental to the rest of his life and how it had morphed. And it just so happened that he and his family had just moved to the main line, so that ended up being an easier pitch than I might have expected. But anyway, we were thrilled that he accepted the offer to come here, and frankly, I'm more excited about what he's accomplished since he got here, which has been, you know, nothing short than amazing. And, you know, I think in a few short years, I don't know, how many years are we into this? 5 years?
3.5, 4. You've been in 5.
So 5 years in, 4+ years in, and I think it's fair to say that we're recognized as certainly one of the best sports law programs in the country. I probably like to think that it's even better than that, but you know, we'll take it, and I'm proud, you know, that we were able to do it here at Villanova and at the law school, where you know, where I at least next door spent 3 years of my life. So anyway, so a little background. I don't want to bore anybody, but so I came out of Villanova. The idea of being a regular lawyer was not something that excited me a lot. But I had a conservative dad who said, you know, I know, you want to do this sports thing, but maybe you ought to like be a regular lawyer first, hoping I'd forget about sports. And so I said, all right, Dad, I'll do that. And so I went to work for a litigation firm. It was the Newport Beach office of a Los Angeles-based litigation firm. And, I went and, took depositions and did a lot of law and motion stuff, which is what they call it in California. And I felt like a real lawyer, wore a suit and tie every day, but I hated it. And, not that this is a message that every faculty person would love me to tell you, but, truth be told, it just wasn't where my heart was, because I really dreamed of this career that was a little different and, involving, prospectively working with athletes, maybe working with teams. I didn't know exactly, but I was really intrigued with the idea of pursuing sports. So I walked away from my law firm 6 months in, and I remember at the time the toughest question that I got was when I told people that I was now a sports lawyer. They're like, "What's that?" I'm like, "Well, it's still work in progress, but I have a meeting with a football player up at USC next week and a baseball player at Fresno State, and they're like, yeah, but like, how do you make money? I don't know about that yet." So I borrowed money from everybody in my life at the time. My dad thankfully helped support me for 6 months or so. And I borrowed money. I'll never forget. I borrowed $6,000 from my cousin, who still lives in Modesto, California. And to this day, he claims that he made the biggest mistake of his life. He said he should have taken equity, but he did not. So I paid back his $6,000 with interest, and I got launched in my sports law career. So I made a decision early on that baseball was the sport that was probably easiest to recruit draft picks in, because there theoretically was less competition, because the players weren't immediately in the major leagues or in the NFL or the NBA, as the case may be. But because of the minor league system, it seemed like there'd be less competition to actually represent these players. So I worked hard at if any of you have friends who were who are athletes, who were playing professionally, it's like at that stage of my career, if I found out you knew somebody, I'd be your best friend. And and I basically networked my way to a set of clients, for the most part in baseball, who were top draft picks. I think after about a year and a half, I had 18 clients. Most of whom you've never heard of, but several of whom were top draft picks, and several became very prominent players like Will Clark and Matt Williams, and I don't know if any here are baseball fans, but players that ended up having quality major league careers. Corey Snyder in Cleveland, a few others around the big leagues, and I really had a lucky break about a year and a half in. There was a lawyer who I'd worked with in my law firm named Lucy Semenek, and Lucy had dated Lee Steinberg when she was at Cal as an undergrad, and they had stayed in touch, and in fact they had just started dating again, and they ended up marrying and had 3 children together, and Lucy and Lee were together for 20 plus years. But so I angled for an introduction from Lucy. I'd love to meet Lee. And I'll never forget the first time I met Lee. He's kind of like, oh my God, one more, young lawyer that thinks they're going to be in sports, right? And
I was one of those meeting Lee too.
Yeah, right. And it was a long line, I'm sure. And I'll never forget his partner, a guy named Mike Sullivan, who ironically went to law school at Villanova. You can believe that. The name of the firm at the time was called Steinberg and Sullivan. Sullivan called me, and I'll never forget the call. He said, Jeff, he said, you know, we've talked to a lot of young lawyers, and he said, I can't tell you exactly why, but Lee wants to hire you. I'm like, really? I said, well, that's great, you know. I said, let's talk terms, and so we started talking terms, and I said, I'll never forget, first offer was $36,000. And, you know, I'm going from zero. I take it back. I made $4,500 my first year in the business. Second year I had a big year. I was on my way to making $7,500. So, and believe me, the supplemental income from my dad and my cousin, they were necessary. These were the days where I go out to dinner with my friends and, you know, like the old short arms. I got it. Believe me, I mean, you know, I was relying on all the friends and relatives I had in the world because, you know, I didn't get into it for money. I mean, it just wasn't, honestly, I mean, I'm not stupid. I mean, I believe there was a business into it, but it wasn't the motivator for me. The motivator was, you know, to do something different. When I came out of law school, you know, it wasn't necessarily for impact. I mean, it was as much ego, it was as much self, you know, motivation to do something that maybe others wouldn't expect. I mean, you know, I can't say there was some like brilliant plan. It was just the instinct to not do what everybody else did. And that ended up guiding me in most of my career, and has even to this day. Where, you know, I always believed that it was a bit of an art form, if not a skill, to keep your mouth shut while you were, you know, getting something into place properly. And, you know, not to talk, not to, you know, look, there are a lot of talkers in the world, I understand, but I happen to be more of a strategic planner, and I always thought, you know, keep your mouth shut, right, keep your head down, you know, figure it out, and when it's time, you know, you stand up and, you know, people say, holy crap, like how did that happen? And I've had, you know, thankfully, you know, more than one of those moments in my life, and frankly, stepping out into the agent world was one of those, where people were like, what happened to Moorad? Like, I thought he was perhaps at law. Yeah, he's okay, right? He'll just, you know, give him time. So, anyway, so I went to work with Lee once we bumped the salary from 36 to 42,000.
Nice job.
And yeah, in fact, Lee said, you know, I remember looking at that board of young players, none of which I've ever heard of, or none of whom I'd ever heard of, and I remember thinking, how much money can he be making? But he's arguing for more. So he must be mentally tough enough to, well, anyway, I don't know what really guided Lee, but I went to work with Lee in April of 1985, and we were together for 18 years. And, you know, eventually Sullivan left shortly, is now the general manager of the, is he general manager?
He's the
capologist for the Denver Broncos. In fact, I called him, I hadn't talked to him in 10, 15 years, I called him and congratulated him when he got that job, which I thought was great. So we have another Villanova alum in the NFL world, if you didn't know that. But I don't know why, he never really came back here. No, I'm not sure. I guess he has his reasons. But in any case, so Mike left probably 4 months after I got there, and we ended up with 4 of the top 12 draft picks in the NFL draft that Lee and Mike had recruited that year. And so I'll never forget, Lee comes to me, he says, hey, you know how to negotiate? I said, yeah, I do okay, I can figure it out. He goes, well, good, because I'm going to go on the road and go, you know, take care of these clients as they're, you know, kind of going through their signing process, and somebody's got to talk to the team. I said, got it, I'll handle it. So, you know, we had, I still remember, of course, we always remember our clients. It's kind of like baseball players who remember what the third pitch from the lefty was, you know, that he hit in the left field. I mean, it's, you know, similarly in the agent world, you kind of remember who your clients were well. We had Dwayne Bickett, who was the 5th pick in the draft, went to Indianapolis. Ken Rutgers, number 7, went to Green Bay. Yeah, great Packer. Ron Holmes, the late Ron Holmes, unfortunately died 5-6 years ago. Ron, out of the University of Washington, played for Tampa Bay, was the 8th pick. And then a great all-pro tackle, Jim Lachey, out of Ohio State, who ended up becoming one of the hogs on the line in Washington and played with the Redskins for a number of years. Actually was drafted by San Diego, traded to the Raiders, and I had a great night one night sitting with Al Davis, the former owner of the Raiders. After Jim had been traded to the Raiders, after demanding a trade to an East Coast team because he wanted to be closer to home, and he thought California was a little too laid back, he then fell in love with the Raider way. And Bobby Beathard, who then ran the Redskins, had worked out a deal with Al Davis to trade for Jay Schrader, who the Raiders had, and he was trading Redskins had Schrader. They were trading him to the Raiders, who had Steve Berline as their quarterback, and it was a straight up deal for Jim Lachey. The problem is Jim Lachey said, wait a minute, Mr. Davis, I really want to stay in LA because I want to be a Raider. And, he had Howie Long, and he had, some of the great Raiders on the team, convincing him that this was the place he could be a great player. And so I sat in Al Davis's office until probably midnight one night after a Sunday day game, and we're watching film together, right? I've never watched film in my life, at least this type of film. And we're watching film of Steve Berline, throwing passes for the Raiders. And he's like, I'll never forget this. He says, Jeff, he says, I need the trigger. He goes, I don't have a good trigger. He goes, look at Berline, he just can't get the ball. For anybody from Notre Dame, sorry, but he says, Berline, he says, he goes, I need the trigger. He goes, I love Jim Lachey, but I need the trigger. And so, look, eventually we lost the argument. Lachey went to Washington, Schrader came to the Raiders and bombed out a few months later. But Lachey became a perennial All-Pro in Washington, and in fact won a Super Bowl with them and had a terrific career. When he retired, by the way, he was asked to run for Congress in Columbus, Ohio, and actually turned down the opportunity, but he's a terrific guy. Now does radio broadcasts for the Ohio State Buckeye Network, and is a great friend. Anyway, long story, sorry, but so we went on to, over the years, Lee and I together, I think, represented 45 first-round draft picks in the NFL. We became very quarterback heavy. We had 25 quarterbacks at our height, probably 10, 12 starters on any given Sunday. Aikman, Young, Moon were kind of the headliners, but there were a whole lot more from Bledsoe to Ken O'Brien to Jeff George, on and on. But some Heisman Trophy winners, Desmond Howard, Andre Ware, some quarterbacks that never made it, David Coinwler, Achilles Smith, had quite a run in Cincinnati, by the way. It was a tough. Mike Brown, I don't think wanted to see us on the draft board, but along with Jason Block, and there were a few. But anyway, and then in baseball, where I had started this little practice on the side, it kind of grew up and kind of exploded all at once. And so, I always prided myself on the negotiation side of things. And, although I helped on the recruiting, Lee was kind of the star in those days, especially on the football side. So I supported him. But in baseball, it was kind of my practice because he didn't do baseball, and we had this evolving practice. Well, over time, I think we processed 47 first-round draft picks in baseball, and some of those young players like Matt Williams and Will Clark, and and those who were referred to us over time, like Eric Karros and Raul Mondesi and Manny Ramirez and Pudge Rodriguez and Juan Gonzalez and Pat Burrell, who actually I represented out at college when he was the first pick in the draft. Darren Erstad with the Angels, another first pick in the draft. Who all had prominent major league careers. I represented a couple managers. Dusty Baker was my first client on the manager side, and thrilled that he had a great year in Washington this year, which ended a little too soon, but hopefully he'll be back, and it was the Cubs year, obviously. So I had a great time. Look, we enjoyed extremely rewarding practice. I used to say I had three things in the agent practice that I loved, and I think I've shared these with Andrew, and maybe it's too blunt, but when you get to be more mature like me, you're not afraid to be blunt. So three things. One was signing the player. It was a high that I know Andrew can relate. It's like you compete with, in some cases, hundreds of agents that are trying to represent the single player. I mean, I'll never forget the work we put into recruiting Troy Aikman as a client exceeded by far the amount of work it took to do his contract. I mean, it was the reality. So winning that battle, that was the first time. The second one was, for me, the thrill of negotiating the breakthrough contract. Call it, in some cases, the record-breaking contract, and often the case because it's kind of a one-upsmanship world, but closing the deal that you knew was the right deal for your client. Whether football, basketball, we represented a few basketball guys, Greg Anthony, John Starks, examples, not a lot, mostly football, baseball. We also represented TV and radio broadcasters, probably had 25 broadcasters, all the on-air anchors in San Francisco, for example, were our clients. And, but being able to, feel great about the result, the negotiation was a second, kind of exhilarating moment for me. And the third was, to be completely transparent, was December 31. And sometimes people look at me like, huh? Like, what do you mean? That's when we got paid. And you know what? That ended up being, even though I didn't get into it for that reason, that ended up being, an important part of the business as the years went on. And, being able to, max out our own business returns were important. And so, at the end of the year, we, had all our expenses paid, and basically Lee and I split the profit 50-50. And that was another high for me. So we had an opportunity back in the early 2000s, or I take it back, late 90s, 96, 97, 98. We came up with the idea that maybe we should consider finding a buyer for our practice. And at the time, the idea of selling an agency was kind of like, huh? Like, what do you mean? Like, what are you selling, right? It's a personal service business. But I was convinced that people would pay, because of the star power of the athlete practice, that people would pay, as well as the reasonably predictable cash flow, whether it be guaranteed contracts in baseball. By the way, the baseball practice really paid its dividends in this analysis, because as we found out, having guaranteed income flow, which baseball had with its contracts with its players, as opposed to football, which had unguaranteed contracts. So the only guaranteed money, even to this day, is money that's guaranteed as a signing bonus, and rarely were salaries guaranteed. I don't even know if they are today. Rare. And so the baseball practice kind of powered the idea of creating value that we might derive from selling the practice, because that's what financial people thought had the greatest value. Like, oh, we can count on the fact that, Sean Green signed a, $84 million or 84, 87, I can't remember, 84. An $84 million contract at 5%, that's $4.2 million in fees. And by the way, we know we're going to get all of those. The only thing they're subject to is a work stoppage. So if there's a strike or a lockout or something of the sort, players don't get paid. But as long as the sport's still being played and there's a labor agreement in place, that's guaranteed money. So that was a real powerful driver, aside from the fact that I charge 5% in baseball in our football practice, limited by union regulations, only charged 4%, and actually has been reduced down from 4 to 3, and maybe heading further down from that. So the idea of, anyway, so we hired, at the time, we hired CAA, Creative Artists Agency, to act as our representative. And everybody told me at the time, well, you got to hire an investment banker. I'm like, why? They said, well, investment bankers, can help maximize value. I'm like, what? I'm not worried about that. I'll handle that part of it. I need somebody to open doors for me. So CAA ended up being a better fit for us because they understood our business. And I felt like, all right, these guys they weren't in sports at the time, but they were in entertainment. And, with Michael Ovitz and the guys that started the agency, they were known as, kind of the top agents or representatives for entertainment. Am I talking too long, by the way?
We're class 6.
Oh, you did? Yeah. Oh, yeah, sorry about that. All right, well, some of you were saying, yeah, okay. So I'll move along. So, anybody else got to leave? You all right? 15 more minutes? Okay, got it. So CAA ended up giving us chairman level access to 4 publicly traded companies. And we ended up getting offers from all 4 companies to buy our firm. And I had this mantra that our firm was worth $100 million. And I didn't really know at the time, the way financial or sophisticated financial people thought in terms of valuation, and that it was all about a multiple of earnings, et cetera. And I'm like, look, I don't really care what the multiple says. If it gets to this number, great. If not, we're going to pass. And so I was a reasonable pain in the ass to deal with in this process, but that was I kind of figured it fudged to our advantage, but I didn't know necessarily on the way in. Sure enough, as we're on the front end of this process, David Falk, Andrew's old partner, sells his firm to SFX for $100 million. And he now claims it was 110, and the number keeps going up. But all of a sudden, I have a headline that says, look, here's David Falk. He's in one sport. We're in 2. We're in, we have a dominant practice in football. We have a very good practice with guaranteed contracts in baseball. And so that ended up being a huge help to us as we pieced together our deal. Now, because football was softer, to be fair, because of the unguaranteed contracts, and our revenues at the time were probably, I think we were $10.5 million. Profitability probably 4-ish. So we weren't huge. By today's standards, it's like, if we had the exact same client list in terms of profile of client today, I'm guessing that, given the escalation of salaries, I'm guessing, that our revenue number would be closer to 30 million. So, again, sign of the times, but we pulled the trigger. We sold to a company called Asante, which was a financial service company in Canada. I got my 100. We actually got a package worth 120 with something between 70 and 80 guaranteed, paid up front, and the balance was subject to an earn-out. And and that was the first time in my life that I'd gotten capital gains dollars. It was a great deal for Lee, myself. Unfortunately, our third partner, David Dunn, ended up leaving about a year into it. So it set back the football practice pretty dramatically. I kept my head down. I worked under an employment contract for 4.5 years. And then in 2004, after a lot of soul searching, I did one of those keep your mouth shut, head down, stand up when it's time. And in August of '04, I stood up and said, I'm retiring from the agent business. And Asante said, well, wait a minute, we have a non-compete. I said, you really don't? Because I'm not going to stay in the business. They're like, well, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to go become the CEO of the Arizona Diamondbacks. And they're like, holy shit, like, where'd that come from? And I said, look, it's a dream that I've had to run a club, and that's what I want to do. And, you know, with all due, in fact, I'll never forget, they asked me, they said, well, you got to pay us something. I said, what do you want? I said, well, we like, the chairman of Asante, I'll never forget, he said, this get broadcast around? Good.
Just for us.
Anyway, truth be told, he said, oh, you should pay us $1 million. I said, look, if it makes you feel better, I'll write you a check for $100,000. But I know I don't have any obligation to do it. I'm happy to do it if it helps you. Never called me back. So if I kept my $100,000. But anyway, so I had to kind of set off a next chapter in my life, and I ran the Diamondbacks for nearly 5 years. We kind of rebuilt the organization. We had won the World Series in 2001. I got there at the end of '04 and inherited the worst team in baseball. We lost 111 games that year. Thankfully, I was only there for 6 weeks of that season, but as a result, we had the first pick in the draft. The year after, we drafted Justin Upton, who I once described as a young Willie Mays, and they hung that around my neck for the rest of his days with me. Like, okay, I'm sorry, I was too honest, but that's what I felt. Yeah, so I learned my business, skills, I guess, as it relates to team management, really on the job, and I had a learning curve, to be fair. I mean, I had to learn. In fact, I'll never forget. I'll flip forward and then tell you the lesson that I learned in Arizona. 5 years in, at the end of At the end of the '08 season, I put together a group and we bought half the San Diego Padres. And I became the vice chairman and CEO of the Padres. And when I got to San Diego, hit the ground running at the end of spring training. It took about 2 months for us to make the kinds of changes that it took me a year and a half to make in Arizona. And the reason is that, when I got to Arizona, I didn't know, I thought I knew how to run anything because, that's kind of what macho guys think, right? But I didn't. And I really needed to learn how to manage. And, and I believed that, I don't have the right read on a certain person, but, I'll give them a chance, right? So you give them 6 months, and then you give them another 6 months. And it's like at the end of the year, they're at the exact same place you knew they were going to be when you first met them for the, first 5 minutes. So I learned to trust my instincts on people. And I learned that, generally your first impressions are right. Doesn't mean they're always right, but they usually are when it comes to business judgment. And what I learned, that I ended up applying in San Diego was you make the hard decisions up front. You swallow hard, you make the tough decisions. You tell people that, look, with all due respect, probably best to move on, and, we'll help you do that. But, you kind of, so we probably, of the 30 people on the leadership team in San Diego, I think 26 of them came in with us. They were hires that we made, people that we knew in the industry, a couple that we brought from Arizona, including my team president, Tom Garfinkel, who's now the CEO of the Miami Dolphins. So, we put together kind of an all-star cast in San Diego, and I'm proud to say I did it much more effectively than I did in Arizona, where it was kind of a slow bleed, and I wished I'd been able to make the tougher decisions up front, but I just didn't know it at the time. So people ask me all the time, hey, was law school helpful? Absolutely. law school was helpful primarily for one reason. It taught me how to spot issues. And, you know, granted, there are legal issues in law school, but there are life issues and business issues kind of every day. And that's what law school taught me. And I'd never trade that away, but I also wished I'd gone to business school because that's what I missed. If I'd known the way my career was going to evolve, I certainly would have done a joint JD MBA. I know that's probably horrible news to all of you, but you know, an extra year at that stage of my life, I would have invested in a heartbeat.
We might have some, any in here?
Any joint?
I think I all just left the class.
There's 3 guys that just left.
Oh, is that right? Yeah, well, that's the difference. Nose to the grindstone. But in any case, it's so I had a great experience. I ended up we were in San Diego for 3.5 years. I negotiated a $1.5 billion TV contract for the Padres, which kind of revolutionized the economics of the franchise. When I got there, the team was making $12 million a year from its broadcast deal, and when we left, they were making $75 million a year. So dramatic difference. We ended up selling the team 3.5 years in. We bought in at a $500 million valuation. We sold the team at $800 3.5 years later. And it was a great financial result. You know, it all happened quick, but a terrific result for me personally. I was the managing general partner of our ownership group, and we were able to sell the team to the O'Malley family, as well as a partner of mine named Ron Fowler, who stayed on as the new control person of the club, and with my total support. I talk to Ron often, and I'm thrilled that he's in place. Although the team suffered a bit, but nonetheless. So since we sold the team, I created a business with a guy named Peter Uberoth, who some of you may know ran the Olympics back in 1984, probably before any of you were born, but in Los Angeles. He also was the commissioner of baseball for 5 years, and today prominently known as the chairman of the Pebble Beach Company, owns Pebble Beach and most of the hotels and golf courses in Monterey. And Peter had always been a mentor of mine. I went to Peter, said, look, you know, I'd like to stay in sports. I'm not sure exactly what I want to do, but I think the idea of buying businesses in the sports space makes sense, not teams, but related businesses. So he said, look, I'm thrilled to do it. He said, I'm 75, I'm too old to put my name on it, you put your name on it. We call it Moorad Sports Partners, and we've invested in half dozen businesses over the last 4 years. I'm the chairman of a couple, one in particular called Prime Sport, which is a $250 million a year business that packages tickets, hospitality, travel, and hotel assets. We're the official partner to 115 sporting events, teams, and leagues. We have 21 teams in the NFL. Augusta doesn't have an official partner, but we do more daily passes than any other group at the Masters. We do about 2,500 badges a day at the Masters. We're the official partner of the NCAA Final Four. We did 9,500 Super Bowl tickets this year. So it's a business that keeps me active. We handle the 4 Grand Slam tennis tournaments, Wimbledon, French, Australia, U.S. We do the Rose Bowl, kind of on and on. And it's a great business that keeps me active, and my relationships in the industry are helpful to the business. And we bought a business with Carlyle, one of the largest private equity firms in the country, and they asked me to take on the chairman role. I said sure. So that's what I do today. Other than teaching at UCLA, as I mentioned, which I love doing. And by the way, a little story out of UCLA. So as I'm teaching in the business school there, having finally achieved my desire of getting a business school education of sorts, I learned from my students, believe me. During the first year, I've done it 4 years, this will be the fifth. And first year, I'm like, why are these empty seats around like every other week? And, oh, well, our students are off doing their case competition. I'm like, what's that? I don't know, law student, I don't really know that. And he said, yeah, he said, business school students, go to these, as I'm sure some of you know, go to these case competitions around the country. And so, MIT has one in conjunction with their analytics conference, and, Tulane, and, a variety of them around the country. And I'm like, that's interesting. At the same time, Andrew and I are having discussions with our board here at the Moorad Center about what we can do that's outside the box. In other words, how can we, do more than just a journal or, a class or two or three. And so I said, look, I have kind of a crazy idea, but here's what I've learned at UCLA Anderson. What if we did a case competition where we linked up Villanova Law and UCLA Business, and we hosted a JD MBA case competition? And so, everybody in the room looked at me like I was crazy, but they said, well, all right, if you want to try it. So I went to the dean of the the business school at UCLA and sold the idea to her. Of course, I said, my idea is we give away 10 grand in prizes, maybe 5,000 for the first place team, et cetera, et cetera. And she's like, well, that's interesting. And she said, well, how would the teams be, comprised? I said, well, let's say 3 to 5 students per school, and at least one student from each team has to be a business student, and at least one student has to be a law student. And so my idea is, look, this is a perfect, mixing of my interests and, kind of my worlds. And I just saw I believe there was a huge advantage to being able to help law students, see how business students analyze, as I never did, and to be able to see, let the business students, learn how to work with lawyers, which many of them don't really understand, and they're not taught that in business school. So we created the, UCLA Anderson, Villanova Law joint case competition, and we've now had 4 of those competitions. This year will be the 4th.
This will be 4.
This will be the 4th this year. We do a home and home. UCLA hosted the 1st and the 3rd, Villanova the 2nd, and now this year. So in April, around the symposium that we do, we'll have a case competition as well. We create a case that is what you worked on it last year. How would you describe it?
Well, there was 2 aspects. There was a business side and a legal side, and I helped write the legal side, and it really was trying to negotiate. But I don't think business people couldn't have participated in the legal side, and I would hope the legal side could have participated in the business problem too. So
exactly. So fun thing that again, right out of my life experiences, wished I'd had that kind of opportunity when I was in law school, and now to be able to bring it. By the way, first year we had 18 teams show up from, I think, 15 schools. Harvard won it. Penn finished second. This was out of UCLA, so obviously great time to leave the East Coast in the winter time, go out west. This year we'll bring everybody out here. But so UCLA finished 3rd, and by the way, at the end of my discussion with the dean of the business school, she said, well, wait a minute, about that $10,000 that you think we ought to post. She said, now if you cover that, we're willing to go all in. Yeah, okay. So I write a check for 10 grand every year. So if any of you compete, hopefully you can win some of my money. And that'll be a good thing. So anyway, look, enough of me in career. Sorry if I went long, but happy to answer a few questions. And then I'm going to meet our new dean, which I haven't done yet. I've talked to him on the phone and look forward to that. And then Andrew's buying me dinner.
Yeah.
So,
That big Moorad budget we have.
yeah, I didn't know we had a budget.
I didn't either.
10 grand. So, yeah.
Hey, I'm Alex. So we're in the middle of our baseball arbitration competition. So can you talk a little about your history in negotiation and what you think makes for a good negotiator, specifically in baseball?
Sure. Most important, I actually do a negotiation session at Anderson each year because, you know, many of the students have the same question and they're like, look, just tell us, like, how do you do it? And I always say that the most important skill of all, I kind of make people guess, and I won't, you know, bore you with that tonight, or I won't play the Socratic method here, right? Because I hated it when I was here, but the most important skill of all, you know, people guess is, you know, it's preparation, you know, sure. I mean, a lot of other things are important, but listening is the most important thing I would tell anybody. It's like if you can keep your mouth shut while someone else is talking and resist the temptation to, you know, to interrupt, let alone to fill the silence. If you can stay quiet, it's unbelievable what a powerful skill that is. People will tell you things that they never intended to tell you. If you can just sit there and calmly, you know, be composed and disciplined to listen, as opposed to, you know, trying to show off and make the most creative argument. It's like, just let the other person tell you what their reality is. And they'll either uncomfortable, I mean, you know, I do this thing, it's kind of silly, but, you know, in my class at Anderson, you know, I'll be talking and then all of a sudden it's kind of uncomfortable, right? But it's unbelievable if you're in an active discussion what somebody will tell you. Look, I'm not going to, you know, suggest that it might be helpful in social circumstances too, but you never know. So, but that's a skill that I think is most important of all. And again, not to discount, you know, the need to prepare, the need to, you know, analytically think through the best arguments, et cetera, et cetera. But if you follow the strain of a discussion, let the other person on the other side of the table tell you more than they intend to tell you. And often that can be a winning hand, as I've learned over time. So, you know, again, it's a short answer, but, you know, there's a lot of other things that go into it. You know, knowing your client, knowing the backdrop that a team has, knowing, you know, kind of the reality of, you know, being realistic about your client and their, you know, strengths and weaknesses. You know, not just wanting to believe, you know, the press hype or whatever, but, you know, really understanding a team's need. And all those things are important too. You know, if you're in a salary cap circumstance, which obviously, you know, the majority of the major sports in this country are, baseball is the one exception. But if you're in a salary cap circumstance, you've got to understand those rules, you know, inside and out. And you've got to be an expert in them. So anyway, short answer, but those would be my thoughts. Other questions? Yes.
Jack, I had a question about whether or not you liked the player agency side more or working more in a front office for an actual team. Like
Yeah.
why you liked.
That's the question I get all the time.
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, I'm probably a victim of, my answer is probably a victim of kind of what I did last.
Yeah.
You know, last information in. I mean, I love the team side. I loved it because, you know, I felt more like a principal, which I was, as opposed to playing the derivative role of the agent. I got tired of that role. Don't get me wrong, I had some unbelievable clients. I mean, you know, we had as a bit of a cardinal principle of our practice, you know, although we made exceptions to be fair here and there, but we generally would only take clients who would, you know, commit to the concept of role modeling, of giving something back to their communities. And virtually all our clients did. Even the bad boys, you know, kind of said, yeah, all right, we understand, we gotta do something. But, you know, whether it was to charities, to their schools, I mean, something like, you know, 200 of our players went back and repaid their college scholarships. You know, some other 100 or so set up high school scholarships. I'll never forget, one of my clients was Eric Karros of the Dodgers, and he won the Rookie of the Year award back in 1992, and we're negotiating his contract. We ended up doing a 3-year deal, or 2 years, 3 years, I think. Wasn't a whole lot of money back then, but it was like, $5.5 million. And so I went to Eric, I said, hey, he went to UCLA as I did, undergrad. And so I said, hey, and a graduate as well. I said, look, it'd be a great thing. We have this thing about giving back. You ought to consider, setting up a scholarship. I said, I've done a little research. Costs $125,000 over 5 years. It'll be an Eric Carroll scholarship, and I think it'd be a really cool thing to do. He says, guess what? He says, I'll do it as long as you do one too. I'm like, oh no, that's not what I meant, right? So I said, you know what? I actually swallowed hard, and I said, okay. So to this day, there's a Moorad scholarship out at UCLA supporting baseball as well. And that's a function of me and my big mouth, but it worked. Look, I love the relationships on the player side. I love the ability to have relationships that have a chance to be lifelong, and many of mine continue to be that. But and by the way, I still miss some of the deal making. That's the part that I enjoyed the most, as I said earlier. I mean, 3 highs, but that deal-making one was the one that really made me go. And I love maximizing, compensation, terms, et cetera, for a player. And not having that, I still miss even to this day. And I miss some of the relationships with the guys. That having been said, for me, transitioning to the team side was kind of the maturation of me as a business person, and that's where I feel most comfortable in retrospect. Today, I couldn't imagine. I have opportunities all the time. In fact, just recently, I was approached by a couple baseball players who, asked me if I'd consider coming back, coming out of retirement, negotiating their contract. And honestly, the fees, for the 2 players would be, multi-million-dollar fees. And I just said, guys, it's not what I do anymore. And, with all due respect, I just, once I transitioned to the team side, it's like, my mindset changed. I felt like I then understood the business of the sports, and certainly the business of baseball, much better than I ever imagined on the team side. And I even, like my arch rival back in the agent days was Scott Boras, who, continues to do a terrific job in that part of the industry, that part of the business. And I'll never forget when I started negotiating, I didn't negotiate many deals with Scott, but, there'd be, times when we would interact, and I listened, pretty intently to what he had to say, and it always struck me that, here's a guy who's clearly the top agent in baseball at this stage, for sure. By the way, he was very happy the day I retired, but just to be transparent. But Scott was, Scott would come in and he would tell me why teams should. Look, you should just pay my guy an extra, $600,000. It's no big deal. The kind of money you're getting from BAM and the TV deals, and I'm like, Scott, you don't understand. It's like we run and it happened to be both teams that I ran, we ran to break even. We didn't run to make a profit. Now, how many businesses in America, outside maybe educational institutions, do you run to break even? It's like it doesn't even make sense, right? You're not in business to break even, unless you're in the rarefied business like a sports team where, you're part of you own an asset that, people believe will continue to escalate in value, and certainly, history has shown that that's been the case. So, you kind of make your profit when you're exiting, with the exception of maybe NFL teams, maybe a few basketball teams, and maybe a couple baseball teams. But I guarantee you, most baseball teams are fighting to not lose money as opposed to, making profit. So I tried explaining this to Scott. He's like, oh, come on, Jeff, you're bullshitting me. I'm like, Scott, I'm not. It's like, trust me. It's like, you know, we reduced salaries in the front office, you know, the PR assistant, you know, who moved on, who made, you know, $26,000. We're trying to hire the next one at $23,500 so that we can save, you know, a few $1,000s. It's like, that's the mindset. And it's like, you know, I know it doesn't seem that way from the outside. I didn't think it was that way either until I, you know, became part of a front office. But, you know, that's really the reality that we're dealing with. So again, to your question, you know, I felt like I had a much better understanding of the totality of the industry on the ownership side. Now maybe it's because I already understood much of the player side, so being able to layer that into my broader experience on the team side just made it feel like it was a more, you know, complete experience for me. I once said to you know, a press outlet of some type, I said, well, you know, because they asked the same question. I got the question all the time, and I said, you know, I kind of like I like the team side better because it's more of the pure business side of the industry. Unfortunately, the way the words came out, it looked like I was suggesting that the agent side was not pure.
Yeah.
And it's really not what I meant, although it was probably a Freudian slip. But,
It's true, though.
but in any case, yeah, it was the team side that I enjoyed the most. And I consider myself extremely fortunate to be able to experience both.
I did too. I mean, quickly, the team side I found a little more intellectually challenging because you're managing a roster, where the agent side, you're like a fantasy player, this guy on this team, this guy on this team, and it's very hit or miss as opposed to a global team side.
Couple more?
Quick.
My name's Dave. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing now, the kind of intersection between sports and business? I know a ton of owners, like Dan Gilbert, Stephen Ross, are throwing their money into venture-backed enterprises. There seems to be a lot of movement from the kind of more established teams into the finding the next kind of disruption in the space. Can you just talk a little bit about that and where you see that industry moving?
Absolutely, great question. You're right. Steve Ross happens to be a partner of mine in Prime Sport. So Steve Ross, a whole number of NBA owners, for whatever reason, seem to be kind of pushing this envelope. Ted Leonsis, for example, now involved in esports. There's countless examples of owners who are, again, pushing that envelope to, understand kind of more of the sports industry and to figure out, where the economic benefits and efficiencies are in the industry. So, and trying to create value around those. So, I spend some of my time analyzing, call it, kind of more tech-oriented startups in the sports space. Most of my time is spent on more mature businesses and analyzing those with a host of private equity partners who we work with. And people ask all the time, are you going to get involved in a team again? I would only say this, if I did, it would probably be global soccer. It's the only thing that interests me at this point at that level. I mean, I'm a fan. I love watching, whether it's Game 7 of the World Series, and even if you're rooting for the Indians, I mean, still a great baseball game. Watching, Warriors, Cavs, I mean, it's like, and by the way, I still can't believe the Warriors got Kevin Durant. Just unbelievable. But, it's, I also, have a lot of friends in the ownership ranks around the team, so, it's fun to be able to, go to a city, call somebody, go see a game, and be able to root for kind of the local team or the team of the person that I'm friendly with. And so, I agree with you. It seems that everywhere you go, whether it's the Dodgers, incubator or accelerator program that they have now in LA. I mean, I think it's kind of the thing to do in sports today is reach beyond your core business and stretch out into whether it's technology, startup space, related businesses. The Red Sox are one of the great success stories in this regard. Remember that the Red Sox ownership group, bought 80% of Nesson, New England Sports Network, when they bought the team, and the Boston Red Sox. Today they own 100% of Liverpool. They own 50% of Roush Fenway Racing, NASCAR team. They own real estate all over the world, from Liverpool to Fort Myers, where their spring training facility is, municipally owned facility, but they own real estate around it, to real estate around Fenway Park. And it's they've got this mega like empire in sports that today's probably worth in excess of $5 billion. And they paid $725 million for the team and 80% of Nesson, and everybody thought they were crazy. So a lot of opportunity to navigate in sports, and that's something we're trying to do. One more? Anybody? Yeah.
I'm Jason, a second year student here. I'm wondering, you mentioned listening, but what are some of the other leadership qualities that have allowed you to succeed?
Well, great question. Probably the toughest lesson I had to learn when I moved from the agent business, which is kind of a manage everything, control everything type of reality. Like, if you're going to make a mistake, make sure it's your mistake, because you don't want to be pissed at somebody else. It's like, it's this mantra of, you just can't trust anybody to do the work. You got to do it yourself. And for me, moving over to a management role as the CEO of the Diamondbacks, the most important lesson I had to learn was to let go and to trust others. And so, that took some time, to be fair. I mean, I used to always have this mindset, okay, work as hard as you can, but I'll take care of it in the end. And it's not a healthy concept when you're leading a team of capable people. So you have to have the right people, to be fair. But if anybody can make the kinds of decisions that I suggested, came quicker in San Diego than they did Arizona, you end up with capable people around you. And the mantra that I ended up evolving as a kind of a cardinal principle of management was give people the autonomy to do their job, but hold them to a bottom line standard. And if you can trust them in that way, it's unbelievable how entrepreneurial and how successful people can be in their own lanes. As the head of ticket sales, or the head of sponsorship, or the head of public relations is like craft and marketing, or the head of stadium ops is crafting a plan for how they're going to message fans, or how they're going to maximize sponsorship value, or how they're going to position the team over the next season. It's like there's a whole range of kind of team-oriented tasks that need to be done. And if I found that if you can give people the autonomy to know that they can make decisions, make creative decisions, again, they're accountable to a bottom line. And at the end of the day, I mean, others may have input, but I found that if you can give people that, that sense of autonomy, it's unbelievable what they'll actually accomplish. So, to me, key principles. Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming in tonight. And
thanks for all.